having a good day there. I'm Hawkeye, and this is the third episode in the series of my investigation, if you will, into why the Leafs have not won a cup since 1967. And today I'm going to talk about a big trade that was made. We're going to get into the winter of 1964, and I'll just call it the Andy Bathgate trade. There were seven guys involved with this trade. Bathgate, I would just use his name because he may be the best player of the group. Certainly not the only Hall of Famer. There is another one involved with this trade, but it was a big trade. And Punch Imlach was the general manager at the time, and certainly through the Maple Leafs history, Imlach is on a very short list of general managers of the Toronto Maple Leafs that made some very big trades during his time. Certainly another one I would add there may be Cliff Fletcher, for example. But um, anyways, it was on February the 22nd, 1964. The Leafs made a deal with the New York Rangers. So yeah, I'm going to look at each player, what they did, what they went on to do, everything like that. So both Andy Bathgate and Don McKenney went to Toronto. They went to the Leafs, while a boatload of players went the other way. And they all had careers in the NHL. We have Dick Duff, Bob Nevin, Arnie Brown, Bill Collins, and Rod Sealing. Each of them went to the New York Rangers in return. So the Rangers were not making the playoffs this year. They ended up in fifth spot. They had the worst goals against average. I'm not sure. I apologize who the general manager was at the time for the Rangers. I should have looked that up, but um, I guess he was figuring why not cash in on these guys? They're both in their 30s, I believe. They still had time left, but why not cash them in and get some younger players and try and rebuild this team, if we will, with some younger talent? And they did an excellent job, the Rangers, and who they got into that. So, but before I get into this, this is unusual. Uh, Down the road, I'll wait till I more or less give all the information about the players, and then I'll say yay, nay, or whatever. It's a wash. This one, um, the Leafs went on to win the Stanley Cup this year, a third year in a row. So I'm just going to have to say I would make this trade again in a heartbeat. We certainly wouldn't know if this trade was not made. Would they still have won, or what would have happened? But since they won, I would make this trade in a heartbeat again. Um, the Leafs ended up hitting the ultimate goal, winning the Stanley Cup. Um, so the job has been accomplished on both sides. The Rangers got young players. Um, and they gave away, their superstar in Andy Bathgate, but the Leafs won the cup. Personally, I would compare this to the Toronto Blue Jays back in 1992 when they traded Jeff Kent to the New York Mets for David Cohn, who was gone by the end of the year. But bam, I would make that trade again. Why? Because they won the World Series. They did it all. They accomplished the goal. And as a fan, I would think that's really, once you hit that goal, I think that's all that matters. But in saying that, there are absolutely are going to be some arguments made in this case that maybe they shouldn't have made this trade, even though they won the cup. So, anyways, I'll start with the players coming to Toronto. So, why not start off the top? Coming to Toronto first was Hall of Famer Andy Bathgate. He was also known as Handy Andy. He was a right winger, 31 at the time of the trade, and he was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. His career started way back in 1952-53 for the Rangers when he played in 18 games. His career really didn't take off really until 54-55 when he pocketed 20 goals. His career high was in 1958-59 when he had 40 goals for the Rangers, so he was a 40 goal scorer. and he won the Hart Trophy that season as the MVP of the NHL. So at the time of the trade, Andy had already played 719 games. He'd scored 272 goals, adding 457 assists for 729 points. Very good accomplishment there. In 1961-62, Andy also led the NHL in assists with 56 and points in 84, giving him the Art Ross Trophy as well that year. He was also an eight-time All-Star from 1957 to 1964, this very year. I think it may have been the month prior when they had the All-Star game, if I'm not mistaken. So after the trade, Andy, for the remainder of the season, he would play 15 games for the Leafs. He did score 3 goals, but he added 15 assists for 18 points in those 15 games. In the playoffs, he played 14 games, scored 5 goals, adding 4 assists for 9 points. Uh, when I looked this up too, he also did the unthinkable. I'm not sure where he got all these, but he also had 25 penalty minutes, which is um, crazy. I don't know if he got a game misconduct or something happened there because he was not a big penalty minute guy, but he had 25 in only 14 games in that playoff. He went on to lead the NHL that season in assists as well with 58. So, as I said, he went on to win the Stanley Cup this year for the Leafs, and that would be the only time he ever did it. It was this year. Um, and he was also tied in the lead in these playoffs with 2 game-winning goals as well. He went on to play another 350 games, scoring 80 goals and 179 assists for 259 points. He was later traded from Toronto to the Detroit Red Wings, but he also played for the Pittsburgh Penguins as well before he retired. Now, the other player coming to Toronto was Don McKenney, also known as Skip or Slip. He was born in Smiths Falls, Ontario. His career started back in 1954-55 for the Boston Bruins, and he hit the ice running. In his first season, he had 22 goals that year and finished second in the Calder voting behind just Ed Litzenberger, who was currently with the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time of the trade. But in that year, he split time between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Montreal Canadiens. But he did get the Calder as the top rookie of that season. Now, Don's career high in goals was 32, which he had 58, 59 for the Bruins. And also that year, he won the Lady Byng Trophy as well. Um, he also that season led the league in assists with 49. So that was a really good season for Don right there. He was an All-Star 7 times from 1959 through 62, and in this NHL season, 1964 as well. By this point, he had played 592 games for the Bruins, um, as well as the Rangers, over the course of uh, 9 seasons, I believe. Um, he scored 195 goals, adding 267 assists for 462 points. After the trade, Don lit it up for Toronto as he had 9 goals in just 15 games. Really did well, giving him 18 for the season. So he doubled his output in just 15 games. While he was a center in New York, he was put on left wing in Toronto. Now, I must say, I think I have the incorrect stats for Don McKenney there. I think those were just Bruins stats. But anyways, in the playoffs this season, he did play 12 games. He had 4 goals, 8 assists for 12 points. Good job. And yep, he won the Stanley Cup. Like Bathgate, this was the lone Stanley Cup he won, but he did it with the Leafs in this season. So after the trade, he played another 130 games, scoring 25 goals, 45 assists for 70 points. And after Toronto, he played in Detroit. And after the expansion, he played for the St. Louis Blues as well before he retired. So, yeah, they got a couple of good, strong players who definitely gave them good strong offensive output as well for the Leafs. But the Leafs did give up a lot for these two players. So I'm going to talk about those guys going to New York now. So first up, we got Dick Duff. Uh, he had scored 20 goals in a season three times already before this trade, so he was an offensive player himself. His career high was 29 that he had in 1958-59 for the Leafs. He had played in five All-Star games. That's 56 through 58, 1962 and 1963, and he had won two cups with the Leafs, that being 62 and 63. By this point, he had played in 582 games. He scored 200 goals, adding 193 assists for 393 points in his 10-year career that he had spent with the Leafs. Now, after the trade, Dick certainly had some playing time left in him. He would score 20 goals in a season two more times, be an All Star twice in 1965 and 1967. He would actually lead the NHL in game winning goals in 1967 68 when he had eight for the Montreal Canadiens. Pretty good job there. But he would go on to win four more Stanley Cups, all with the Habs, and those were in 1965, 66, 68, and 69. The Habs were excellent in the 60s as well. Um, but he would go on to play another 448 games in the NHL. He would score another 113 goals with 127 assists for 240 points. Over the course of his career, he actually had played in 114 playoff games. So he played a few playoff games over his career. During those games, he scored 30 goals and 49 assists for 79 points. He was also inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame as well, so he's in there. Um, and after his playing days, he even coached the Leafs for two games back in 1979, 80. Now, just to let you know, I'm gonna set it up at some point. I'm actually gonna create, as I go through everything, like a Leafs legends list, like the guys, the best guys that they had during the decade, I would say, or the best numbers. They'll have to have spent there a little bit of time, not just for a cup of coffee, like Bathgate and McKenney did here, but I will put Dick Duff on that list. He'll be the first guy I'm going to add on there. He scored 200 goals in Toronto, won a couple of cups. That's good work. So he's going to be on that list there for me. I'll set that up at some point in some video too. Now, also going to New York was Bob Nevin. He was pretty young. I think he might have been 24 or 25, so he was young, but he was going. He started his career back in 1957-58 for the Leafs, but he only played four games. In 1960-61, that's when he was starting to get full-time work in the NHL. He was one of the guys for the Leafs, and he scored 21 goals in his rookie year. Really good job. And he finished second in the Calder voting for the top rookie. He lost out to Dave Keon. Not a bad guy to lose to there. Fantastic player. But they were both rookies, both playing for Toronto at that time. So that would have been pretty exciting to watch as a fan. Those two guys. Now, he played in the 1962 and 63 All Star games as well. By this point, he had played 250 games with 55 goals, 100 assists for 155 points. And like Duff, he won two Stanley Cups in 62 and 63. So now, after his trade to New York, Bob Nevin played very well in New York, put up really good offensive numbers for them. He actually ended up scoring 31 goals in 1968-69 for them. He matched this career high in 1974-75 when he was playing with the LA Kings at the time. He played in two more All Star games, 1967 and 69. And he also played for the Minnesota North Stars, as well as he actually jumped over to the WHA. At some point, some video, I'm going to get right into that league, which helped out players, I think, immensely. but he jumped over to that league in 1976-77 and played for the Edmonton Oilers for a season before he retired. But after the trade, he would actually go on to play another 878 NHL games, scoring 252 goals, adding 319 assists for 571 points. So that was a good player they gave up there, a very good player. Now, as well, another player was Rod Sealing. He had actually just played one game for the Leafs, I believe the previous year. Yes, but he would have go on to have quite a career, starting right in New York, where, um, like Nevin, he was known, I think, for playing for the Rangers. He would go on to play 978 more games in the NHL, scoring 62 goals with 268 assists for 330 points. As well, he would play in the 1972 All-Star game, so he was an All-Star as well. He would actually come back to play with the Leafs again later in his career. After that point, in the mid 70s, through from 1974 through 76, and he also played for the Washington Capitals, St. Louis Blues, and the Atlanta Flames. He actually had a brother, Rick Sealing, who played in the NHL as well. Rod was a defenseman, and Rick was a winger, if I remember correctly. Both from Kitchener, Ontario. As well, another defenseman in the trade was Arnie Brown. Um, he had played just 6 games for the Leafs so far in his career, so he was just used sparingly. Young player. But the following season, that's when his career really started. He was getting full-time work in the NHL with the New York Rangers. He might have been a little rougher and tougher as well, which hey, I'm old school. I like that in my players. He wouldn't be afraid to drop the mitts if he had to. He did grab 145 PIMs the next season. That was his career high, but that was during the 64-65 season. So he also played for the Detroit Red Wings, New York Islanders, and the Atlanta Flames. After the trade, he would go on to play 675 more NHL games, scoring 44 goals with 141 assists for 185 points, and pick up 733 penalty minutes as well. Now, finally, the last guy in this trade was Bill Collins. He didn't get a chance to play in the NHL. He didn't play with the Leafs. He didn't play with the Rangers either. It wasn't until the expansion of 1967. I assume he was picked up in the expansion draft by the Minnesota North Stars, and he came in jumping. He certainly showed that he could put the puck in the net in the NHL. He went on and scored a career high 29 goals in 1969-70 for the North Stars. He also led the league that year in shorthanded goals with 6, so that's a pretty good job there. But he did go back and play with the Rangers in 1975-76. But he did bounce around the league a lot. He didn't stay anywhere very long. Like I think he was in Minnesota for 3 years, and that was like the longest he had stayed anywhere. So, as well as the Rangers and North Stars, he also played for the Montreal Canadiens, Detroit Red Wings, St. Louis Blues, Philadelphia Flyers, and the Washington Capitals. He did have a good career though. Like he went on to play 768 NHL games, scoring 157 goals with 154 assists for 311 points. So the Leafs gave up a lot for these two players. Now, as I said, they went on to win the cup, so I'm fine with that. I would green light this. Boom, I'd do that again in a heartbeat. But you can make that argument and say we don't know what would have happened if they didn't make this trade. Would they? Could they still go on to win the cup that year? We will never know. But guys like Arnie Brown or Rod Sealing, would they have helped them out through the 70s, perhaps, in strengthening their defense, perhaps? Um, But hey, as I said, I would still go ahead and make that trade. But anyways, that was fun bringing that for you. And next, we're going to jump right into the playoffs, 1964 playoffs with the Leafs. So yeah, if you like this video, don't be afraid to hit like. Don't be afraid to subscribe as well. Certainly, hoping to just keep putting the videos on here about my beloved Toronto Maple Leafs and their history and looking into why they haven't won a cup since 1967. And hey, if you want to comment, go ahead and do so as well about anything you like. And before I go, I did update the Toronto Maple Leafs roster for this season. And I don't know if this is correct, but I think it is. I got Bathgate and I got McKenney on the second line with Red Kelly. What a line that would be. Um, they also have a very, very good third line with Bobby Pulford, Ron Stewart, and Jimmy Pappin on your third line. That's really good. So yeah, they were a force to be reckoned with for sure. But anyways, that was a lot of fun. And until next time, go Leafs go.